Many times, all of our countries have had such economic crises, but they extricated themselves from those crises. The Soviet Union, too, despite all the problems and all the pain, will make it.
Я веду компанию, если мне трудно будет, всех буду спрашивать.
Подсказывай.
Да.
Михаил Сергеевич, один из лучших английских журналистов, мой коллега Джон Сноу.
Для вас это хорошо, для меня сложнее.
Нет.
Я вас не вижу, но тем не менее. У вас одна вот эта трудность.
Говорю.
Вопросов мы хотим задать. Поэтому Джон уже третий... Да, мы из этого.
Как минимум.
Но Джон уже третий день меня просит, чтобы попроси Михаила Сергеевича отвечать.
I'm being asked by John to tell President Gorbachev for answers to be very short. You know, Napoleon said briefly and unclearly. The answer should be brief and unclear.
Я тоже перевода пока не слышу, имейте.
Да, и у Михаила Сергеевича нет перевода.
I have a book for you afterwards, which I want to give you, and I want to get you to sign afterwards.
Добавьте, пожалуйста, я плохо слышу. Mikhail Sergeyevich, прежде всего я хочу...
Mikhail Sergeyevich, first of all, I would like to thank you for finding time, despite being so busy here in London, for finding time for this talk with me and my British colleague. Hospitality dictates that first I give John an opportunity to ask you a question here in London. Yes, John.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, Mrs. Thatcher said of you before you became the Soviet leader, she said, "This is a man we can do business with." Well, now Mrs. Thatcher has gone, but you are still the Soviet leader. Now we have John Major as the Prime Minister. Are we still able to do business, and are we doing good business? Has it affected the relationship?
Знаете, эти дни меня еще больше убедили в том,
over these days I've become even more convinced that we will be able to work well and very fruitfully with the new British Prime Minister. And I hope that this cooperation will be reflected not only in Soviet-British dialogue and Soviet-British cooperation, but also since we now have a new situation after this meeting with the G7, I think within this framework too we will cooperate well, and yesterday we had several discussions with your Prime Minister and we agreed that we will work actively within this framework as well. So we have new opportunities for cooperation, for continuing what was started in our relations and also for making our relations even more effective, more efficient, and I'm quite optimistic about cooperation with the current Prime Minister of Britain. Mikhail Sergeyevich, I would like once again to return to these rather difficult days here in London. Mr. Major, who doesn't seem to be a very emotional man, called these meetings here historic. Could that be a little bit of an exaggeration? How do you assess the importance of meetings here in London? Well, we used to overuse the word historic, sometimes without much sense. And probably back in the Soviet Union, people are a little apprehensive about too much use of that word. But I think that in this particular case, I would agree with Prime Minister Major. I think that what began here in London was the launching of something very promising, and I hope and think that this will evolve into something very important because
руководителей крупнейших государств,
we have seen the political will of the leaders of
с учетом
major
того,
countries
что
to
они
work
имеют,
together
опираясь на этот позитив, который достигнут за последние годы,
based on the positive
развитие
achievements
международных отношений
of
в
recent years
сотрудничестве,
to work
теперь
together to
и пойти
further
дальше,
develop our
опираясь,
relationship,
использовать те шансы, которые
to make
открыл
further steps,
выход из холодной войны и
to use the advantages of the end of the Cold
новому
War,
этапу и
of
вступления
the new
в новый этап
beginning
развития
of the new
мировой
phase
политики.
in international
Думаю, что
relations.
Все, в общем-то,
And I think that
с большой тревогой размышляли,
all the
ожидали
G7
результаты этой
leaders,
встречи, потому что
and I think everyone,
это я
was
почувствовал.
thinking with
Все были,
a lot of concern about
я бы
what
сказал так,
would
чувствовали
happen
себя ответственными
at the meeting,
за принятие,
because
может быть,
everyone
очень
felt
важных решений, политических решений.
his responsibility
Всё остальное
for
это
taking these very important
вытекает.
political decisions.
И
I think the
эта
political
встреча, мне
decisions
кажется, с этой точки
are
зрения
the beginning,
оправдала ожидания и
and
открыла новый этап,
in that
новый
political
курс развития.
sense, I
Теперь
think
уже
that the
наращиваем.
meeting justified the expectations, lived up to the
Сотрудничество
expectations,
на
and the
базе
important thing
этих
now
подходов.
is to step up
Тут нужны
practical
механизмы.
cooperation based
Кое-что
on this new approach. I think we
«семерка»
need some
своим участием
practical
на этот
arrangements,
счет
some
уже
mechanisms
решила
for this,
механизм
and the
трудоустройства.
G7 and I have decided
Итак,
on
я
some of those mechanisms already.
Оцениваю,
So
так же, как
my
и
assessment
господин Мейджор, я бы
is the
назвал
same
это
as
событием
that of Mr. John Major. I think this was a historic event.
Well, now, could I take you to one of the most important things which flowed from this week, and that was your decision to go ahead with a START treaty on long-range nuclear weapons, which you will sign in the next few days. I was one of those who stood outside the Hofti House in Reykjavik when we were in this incredible excitement as the meeting got longer and longer, and we waited outside as we began to believe that you had convinced President Reagan that we could realize the dream of a nuclear-free world. Is it still your ambition to achieve that? Is what you set out in the Hofti House, is this START treaty part of that?
Ну, прежде всего, я доволен, что имею
First of all,
дело с участником этой встречи.
I'm very pleased to see
уникальной,
here
драматичной.
a person who was there during that meeting, which was unique, which was very
Её воспринял как
dramatic,
провал.
which was seen initially by many as a failure, but which turned out to be an important breakthrough. Without Reykjavik,
Сегодняшней
think
ситуации, когда мы вышли на
what we have
подписание
today
очень
would
важного
not be possible. What
исторического
we have
документа.
today, and I mean the
Вот
START
мне
Treaty,
приходится
which is
говорить
again a
об
historic
этом,
document.
что
I
так
have to
не
use the
станешь.
word again,
И не употребишь это слово, когда речь идет
but I have to use it because
о
this
сокращении
really
ядерного потенциала,
is
тем
a
самым
treaty
это всё
about
как бы нас отодвигает от этой
a very
ядерной
substantial
угрозы
reduction of the nuclear
и создает уверенность в том,
weapons,
что мы, главное,
of the
можем
nuclear
решать самые
capabilities,
крупные дела нам.
and that, of course, is an immense step forward that shows that
Наверное, это о
we
многом
can
говорит.
do
Да, я думаю,
other important things, which are no less important than the reduction in nuclear arms.
по пути
Let me say, I do believe that we have to continue movement toward a nuclear-free world.
И в связи с этим я подтверждаю
And I would
концепцию,
like
которую я выдвинул в
to reiterate
1986 году.
In this context,
Она и тогда
to reaffirm the
была
concept
встречена
that I
неоднократно
put
везде.
forward in
Сначала
1986.
назвали это иллюзией,
At that time, there
а
were
потом
some
вдруг мы вышли на сокращение
who doubted,
класса
who thought that this was just an illusion.
ракеты
But then the
средней
next
малой
step
дальности
was that
и
we
открыли активный
did
переговорный
conclude a
процесс
treaty
по
that
стратегическим
eliminated
вооружениям.
a whole category of nuclear weapons, the INF
такой
missiles.
результат.
And then
Так
we
что
intensified the
вроде бы то, что
process
казалось
of
тогда
START
утопией,
negotiations, and now we have this
я думаю,
result. So what seemed
можно
a
понять,
utopia at that
крупные
time,
деньги
and it's
выбираются
understandable
не
that
сразу
major ideas are often initially regarded as impossible, but I think that it is now obvious that it was a well thought out concept, and we will continue to move in that direction on the basis of that concept. It was not just my idea, it was the position of the Soviet leadership.
But what do you do about the Iraqs of this world, the rogue countries that develop nuclear weapons without yourself keeping them? They remain some sort of a threat. Or do you think you and the Americans and we could get together in some nuclear pact that would protect the world from the dangers of people like Iraq?
Ну, знаете, я скажу, что эта сфера настолько ответственна.
Well, I have to say that this is really a critical area and one of the critical points in our common security. So we have to be very serious, to approach very seriously such matters. So, since we do intend to move forward with the United States, I think that the other members of the nuclear club will have to begin to join our efforts. In addition, we have to give very serious thought again and again to the problem of non-proliferation, of making sure that this nuclear club does not expand, because quite a few countries are capable of developing nuclear weapons. But therefore, since the world has begun movement toward nuclear disarmament, we cannot approve of such nuclear intentions, and therefore we need to use the United Nations and other negotiating mechanisms to make sure that no such thing happens, and that verification and other mechanisms are used for this. I would like, with my colleague Jon Snow, to return to London. On the eve of this meeting with the G7, there was a lot of speculation that the Soviet Union is coming to ask for credits, for loans. All was focused on this. But even at that time, you were emphasizing that the goal is to integrate the Soviet economy in the world economy, that the goal was to really break the Berlin Wall, not the political Berlin Wall, but the economic wall. Have we been able to do it, to make a breach, at least, in this wall? I think that indeed this is the most important political result of this meeting. I was saying in Moscow that this was not a meeting of the finance ministers. I believe that, of course, credits and loans are very normal, and this is something that is quite natural in international economic relations. But this was not my task this time. What we were saying was something different, and that is that the Soviet Union has made a choice to become organically integrated in the world economy, in the world economic relations. And therefore, it's important to make sure that the Soviet Union is able to accept the rules of the game of the international economy, that we can make our economy and the economies of other countries really compatible. And this is why we are undertaking economic reforms and moving toward a market economy. But we say that this cannot happen unless the Western countries change their approaches too, the approaches to their economic relations with the Soviet Union. A great deal in those economic relations between the West and the Soviet Union developed and evolved over the years of the Cold War and bears the mark of the Cold War. And therefore, under the pretext of making sure that the Soviet Union cannot expand its military power, the West built a lot of barriers that impede our cooperation today. So we need some reciprocating movement from the West. For example, on some very major projects that have already been prepared by the Soviet side and the Western business community, I could illustrate some of those important list some of those important projects that in which the business community of various countries is prepared to participate. But if in that enormous project, $1 billion worth project, there is just one element that is banned by COCOM, the project cannot go ahead. So this is a problem. In order to show that we are ready to open up to the world economy, that we think about a common future, a future of common security, we are prepared to cooperate in our defense sector, in converting our defense sector. And this is a very strong argument to show that our intentions are really sincere. And we now see that we have some understanding in the West, in the G7, of this. And we believe that it's important to show that it is not just the Soviet Union that will make its movement towards the market economy. There will be some reciprocating movement from the West. And that's why we discussed the possibility of our association with the International Monetary Fund, with the World Bank, the European Bank, and other international economic associations, some kind of membership on some basis, and we were discussing this too. I would like to continue my question in the following way. The breakthrough in the political area, the new thinking breakthrough, was a few years ago. Now we believe a new breakthrough is happening here in London, in the economic area. Why this gap in time? Was it inevitable or was it some mistake? Well, sometimes people are impatient. They feel the pressure of events and they want to go to bed today and to wake up tomorrow in a very different world. And for everything to be fine. But this never happens, either in politics or in the economy, when such big things are involved. So we need to come to it, to reach a certain stage of maturity. Maturity is very important. Things have to mature. And therefore, without the steps that we were taking in the political area, to build trust, to engage in this unprecedented political dialogue, this phase of an economic breakthrough would not happen. So I think that if we do not attain a new phase in our economic cooperation, that may one day affect the political dialogue and make it less productive. And therefore, I think that it's not just current economic problems, and we do have some that pushed the Soviet Union to this kind of approach. To say so would not be serious. I was asking my colleagues, can you name one country that has not had economic problems, very painful economic problems? Many times, all of our countries have had such economic crises, but they extricated themselves from those crises. The Soviet Union, too, despite all the problems and all the pain, will make it. But we are thinking about the long-term prospect, about the big things, what we have to do in order to preserve our world global civilization and to use it in the interest of all.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, even while you have been out of the Soviet Union, conservatives like Colonel Altsinin have been calling for your resignation, have been attacking you. Which is the greater threat to your efforts to bring about economic perestroika? The right wing, as represented by people like that, or the radical wing?
Ну, во-первых, вы в каждой стране.
Well, first of all, in every country, and particularly in the countries where opposition parties exist, in every country you will hear from time to time calls for the resignation of a government.
Выступление
And therefore,
полковника Алкнеса,
the call of People's Deputy Colonel Alksnes, in a way, just shows that a democratic process continues in the Soviet Union, with a pluralistic society being formed. So it's unpleasant to hear this, but I would like to say that there is one plus to it, and that is that democracy is underway in the Soviet Union. Of course, democracy also requires a certain degree of political culture, and we don't have enough of that yet, and the fact that we have people like Colonel Alksnes shows that we have some way to go toward a real political culture, toward mastering that real political culture. But let me answer your question without saying too much about the right, the left, the center, etc. Let me put it in simpler terms.
Перестройки через реформы, принимая политические
Several
решения,
years
принимая те или иные законы.
Try to push forward the process of Perestroika politically by adopting certain laws, certain legislation, by creating a framework. But you know what happened recently? A group of American experts that visited the Soviet Union at the request of me and President Bush has concluded something very interesting. Some time ago, maybe a year ago, they said all the political activity was in Moscow, rallies, debate, etc. But around Moscow, a few hundred kilometers from Moscow, everything was quiet and no change was happening. Now change is happening everywhere in the Soviet Union. What we began from above, what the leadership began, now has the support of the people. People want change. Of course, people want change under certain conditions. They want change that improves their lives. And this support for change is the most important thing today. So I think that the trend in support of change, in support and to radicalize reform, now has supporters in all groups, among the right wing and the left wing and in the center. Of course, I'm not referring to the right wing or left wing adventurers. That's not serious politics. But the rest is quite normal. The rest is pluralistic opinions which make it possible for us to see the process of developing political opinion and to adjust our policies.
Can I just press you on that then, Mikhail Sergeyevich? The Perestroika has produced, in the republics, some democratically elected non-communist presidents. Can you therefore foresee a day when it is possible that there might even be a non-communist president of the Soviet Union? And could you be that man?
Да, вы правы, что кое-кто избран
You are right that some
не коммунист,
non-communists
чаще всего это
have
бывшие
been
коммунисты,
elected presidents.
что
In most cases,
Что-то
those are former
остается
communists, so something,
воспитания
I think, some
прошлого.
part of them
Кто еще окажется в какой
remains
партии, посмотрим.
that,
Дело не в этом.
and who will join
Дело
which
в том,
party
что
in the future,
То,
we'll
что мы
see.
создали в рамках
That's not the point. The
демократии,
important point is that what we created
пришли
within the
к
framework
свободным
of our
выборам,
new democracy,
это
the free
гарантия
election,
того, что
has
общество
created a guarantee, a
будет все
safeguard,
больше
that
каждый раз
our
от выбора
society
к выборам
will,
видеть
going
лучше,
from one election to
всех
another,
претендентов,
will better and better
будет идти лучший
see
тщательный отбор,
what each
и
contender
это будет
stands for. The
создавать
selection process
гарантию,
will
что на
work,
всех
I think,
уровнях,
better and better,
начиная
and
от
that will create another guarantee that at all levels,
районного звена
starting
до
from the local level
высшего
and all the way to
союзного
the
уровня будут приходить все-таки люди,
Soviet Union federal level,
те, кто
we
себя
will
показал с хорошей
have
стороны,
people
кто проявил
elected
себя,
who
и
can do
кому
things
люди доверяют.
and who
А
have
реформы
the people's
нельзя
trust.
вести, если ты не пользуешься доверием.
Reforms cannot be implemented
И
without
какую партию
people's
будут
trust and support.
представлять?
As to
Это
which
уже вопрос
party
другой.
the president, a president would belong to is a different matter, because that is for the election to decide. And the election has to be a competition of programs, a competition of parties, a competition of leaders, and the winner will have the support of the people. And naturally, the winner in the election will be the leader of reform in the Soviet Union, continued reform in the Soviet Union. I think it's important to see that this is the point. Within the framework of political pluralism, all will contribute to the political process.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, я под большим впечатлением того, что видел здесь.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, I'm very much under the impression of what I've seen here in London over these days. So once again, a question connected with these events in London. The important decisions that you have taken here with your colleagues, many of them at least, will begin to produce results sometime later. Some time is necessary, but given the fact how things are in the Soviet Union today, we also need some urgent measures of support. What about that?
Ну, во-первых, надо сказать, что и до
First of all, I have to say that even before this meeting,
взаимодействуем с многими странами,
were
и многие из
working
них
together with many of
активно
those countries.
действует.
We have been cooperating with many of them very actively. Many of them have shown real solidarity with us in Perestroika, and not just verbal solidarity, rhetorical solidarity. They are doing practical things such as credits, solidarity in the form of credits, etc. But let me first say that it is not right to think that we will be saved by loans and credits. It is for us to bear the main burden, to bear the main load. Just think about this. Our GNP is worth 2 trillion rubles, 2 trillion rubles. And the press was speculating whether the West would allocate loans or credit worth 10 or 15 or even $30 billion a year. So compare 10 or 20 billion dollars and the 2 trillion ruble worth economy. That, I think, puts everything in its own place. It's clear that it is for us to undertake Perestroika and to complete the effort of Perestroika. But of course, we will be able to do it faster, we will be able to do it with less risk, and this is the conclusion that has been drawn already in Europe, in America, in all countries. In the United States, for example, they are coordinating more closely with Canada and Mexico, and that shows to you that things move much faster if there is country-to-country cooperation and international cooperation. This gives benefits to any society. And of course, cooperation will benefit not just us, but also our partners. And finally, of course, now that we have moved, we have approached the most critical point in our reform, there are some areas in which our success, some crucial areas in which our success can be achieved much more rapidly if we cooperate on those specific matters with our Western partners. And many people in the West, I would say, now understands that. Convertibility of the ruble, for example, would not benefit just the Soviet Union. Of course, it will benefit the Soviet Union, our domestic economic processes, because we see people needing dollars because dollars, convertibility of the ruble into dollars will solve many problems for our businessmen, for our factories, will make it possible for them to establish cooperation with their Western partners and to solve their problems. That's true. But at the same time, convertibility of the ruble will create new opportunities for the West, for the Western firms, for the Western businesses. So, once we come to that problem, it is certainly appropriate to think how to make this transition to a convertible ruble more effective and less painful. So
в решении таких конкретных
On
вопросов
this and
есть,
other specific problems,
естественно,
yes, indeed,
мы
cooperation
рассчитываем сотрудничество.
with the
Я об
West
этом
is
говорил.
something we are
И
calling
речь не шла
for,
о цифрах,
we
а
expect,
речь шла о
and
подходах.
I was
Или
focusing on this
проблема сейчас у нас
not in terms of
формирования
figures, but in terms of approach.
Поэтому товарная интервенция как форма
Another thing,
общепринятой,
consumer market.
в мире,
We
которая
will
бы
be
помогла
creating a new
нам
consumer market,
сейчас
and the infusion of
и
products,
поворачивая
of
наше
goods,
производство,
would very much help,
ориентируя на выпуск
because
товаров
it will
на
also
внутреннем
help to
рынке,
reorient our
и
own
использовать
industries.
возможности с
And at
теми
the same time, it would
партнерами,
help
с которыми мы
to
сотрудничаем,
work
и
more
улучшать
actively
ситуацию.
together with our Western partners to improve the situation in the Soviet consumer market.
One last question each. Yeah. I can ask one. One last question each. Yeah.
Your last question.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, in Oslo, in your Nobel Prize speech, you said in 1985, in April of that year, you never conceived how immense the problems you would have to deal with in the Soviet Union would prove to be. If you had your time over again, is there anything you wish that you could have done differently?
Ну, я думаю, что если бы пришлось
Well, I think
Сначала
that if I had to begin again,
начинать этот процесс,
this
я бы
whole
его
process,
начал.
I would certainly have done
Потому что
that
теперь я
again. I would certainly
убежден
have
в результате того, что я
undertaken
больше
that
знаю о
again,
своем обществе и
because
мире,
now that I
что
know
это
more
было
about my
надо,
country
больше
and the
того, это
world,
надо было лет
I'm even more
10-20
convinced
назад
that
начинать.
what we began was
Если
necessary.
не раньше,
We
скажем
really
так.
should
Но
have
это уже
begun
слишком
much
широкая
earlier,
тема.
maybe 20
Ну,
years
а
ago,
то,
10 or
что
20 years ago, maybe even
Как бы
earlier,
мы делали,
but that's
я скажу так, главные звенья бы
anyway.
такой концепции
How
сохранили.
to go about it? That's a question.
Вот ведь
In the main,
много дискуссий
in the main,
велось. С чего начинать?
we
С
would have done the
экономики
same,
или
yes.
политики?
There's
С
been a lot of
экономической
discussion,
реформы
for example, whether we should have started with the
Надо
economy
ли,
or with
как,
political
когда и
reform,
как надо
whether
было решать
political
проблемы,
or
связанные
economic
с
reform
развитием
has
федерации,
priority.
управлением ее.
When to
Можно
begin
продолжать и спорить. И, может быть, где-то
reshaping our
не
federation.
произошло
All of those questions are
определенной
legitimate,
синхронизации
and
принятия
probably
решений,
we
где-то
should
мы
have
опаздывали,
done it in a
и
more
где-то
synchronized
поспешили,
way.
я думаю, всё,
Sometimes
отказавшись
we
от
took
старых
the
форм и структур, а
decisions
новые еще не создали.
a little
Это,
rashly,
нанесло
abandoning
определенный
old
ущерб. Поэтому
structures a little too
тактически
rashly without creating the
коррективы
new
были
structures.
внесены.
So
Но основные
tactically, I
элементы
think that
этого
maybe I
этой
should have done
политики,
some
этой
things
концепции перестройки
differently,
надо
adjusted certain
сохранить.
things
Это всё
differently, but
я теперь
strategically
еще
I
более
think that
убежден, уже
I
опираясь на
would have gone
знания,
ahead with
всё
Perestroika
необходимо это
in about the
обществу.
same way because
Исторически время
this is
не
something that is
потеряно.
necessary for our
Хотя
society. Historically, we
всё
have
надо
not
было начинать
wasted our
раньше.
time. We should have begun earlier, of course.
Михаил Сергеевич, мой заключительный вопрос,
Mikhail Sergeyevich,
Носит,
my last
в
question
общем-то, личный
is
и
more of a
не
personal
вполне дипломатический
nature, not
Но
very
мне
diplomatic,
хочется
maybe,
его
but
задать.
I would
Вот
like to
в
ask
Лондоне,
this.
восприняты
London,
некоторые ваши идеи,
Some of your
результаты
ideas
которых скажутся лишь после
have really
определенного
been very
времени.
well received,
Это относится
but
и к
those are the
другим
ideas
важным,
which will yield
важнейшим
benefits
политическим
sometime
шагам,
later.
и в том числе
And
в
I'm
нашей стране.
referring
В общем,
to
одним словом,
mostly to
вы
your political
сеете,
program, your political
а,
agenda,
быть может, жать
You are
придется
sowing.
другим.
but maybe
Вас это
others
никогда не
will
смущало?
reap. Have you been bothered by this at any point in time?
Нет, не смущало. Меня, например, радует, что то, что
No,
я
I'm
делал
not
в
bothered by
Ставропольском
this.
крае,
I'm very
И
pleased that
закладывал на
what
основе
I was
системного
doing
подхода.
years ago in the Stavropol
когда
region,
я думал
based
и о
on a
развитии
systematic
экономики,
approach,
и городов, и
systematic
сел,
approach towards the
и
economy,
культуры,
the social development of
и
our cities and
курортов,
villages in the
туризма
Stavropol
и так
region,
далее.
the development of
сегодня
culture, the
этот
development of
край
tourism,
полнокровной
etc.,
жизнью живет.
has made
Я не
this
скажу
region,
беспроблемный. Я не думаю,
I
если
think,
проблем
a
нет,
region
общество
which is
остановилось,
living a
оно
very full and active life, of
Раз
course,
есть
not
движение,
without
будут
problems,
проблемы.
because
Но
there is always movement, and that means that there
я
is always
вижу
problems.
какие-то
Problems.
результаты дает. Поэтому
But I see results today And
Я думаю, вы
therefore,
правы.
I
Я
think
когда-то беседовал
that you
с
may be
писателем
right.
Леоном, ему было 90 лет.
Some time
я
ago,
был
I
в
was
его
speaking to our veteran
Поздравил
writer
его,
Leonid
надо
Leonov.
было
I came to his flat to congratulate him on
интересная
his
беседа. Я был
90th
поражен прежде всего его
birthday.
проницательностью,
We had a
мудростью.
very good talk. I really was
Я был
amazed at
поражен
how
тем, что он в
wise
курсе всех наших
that
дел.
man was, the kind of
И
penetrating
он
mind
высказал
that he
тогда
has.
мысль, что
He
самое
was very
серьезное
much aware of all that was happening in the
проблема и
country, and
трудность
he
состоит в
said to
том,
me at that
что
time
то, что
that
вы
the
делаете
main
сейчас,
problem, the
это
main
закладывает
difficulty
формы
is
жизни,
that what
которые-
we are
которые
doing
придет,
now
и жить будет наше государство вообще
establishes
через 100 и
forms
через
of
150
life
лет.
that
Сегодня, когда
will
это все делается, и эти
shape
поколения
our
должны
life for
это
decades
всё
and
делать,
centuries to come.
конечно, нелегко им приходится.
Now that we're doing it, of course, the current
И
generation
давит
bears a
текущие
difficult burden.
проблемы. И вот это
And the
естественное
current problems
противоречие,
are
в этом вся
tremendous.
трудность
And this is a
нынешней
difficult
проблемы.
contradiction.
Но
This is a difficult
не потому,
situation
что я
indeed.
человек, который
But
исповедует этот
I'm not
старый лозунг
a man
во имя светлого
who
будущего.
thinks
Нет,
that,
наоборот, я
we
думаю,
should sacrifice
мы просто уже не
for
могли
the
больше
brighter
не делать
future.
то, что мы сейчас делаем.
That-
Нам
that-
надо
that
было
is an
делать,
old
чтобы мы
slogan.
не оказались на
I
обочине
do not
прогресса
support that
и
approach,
развития
but
всей
we have to
цивилизации.
do what we are doing,
И
because
поэтому
otherwise
нам надо
we
делать,
would have
но
been
надо делать
shunted
так,
aside in the world, in the
плоды
global
были уже
civilization.
и в
So we have
ближайшее
to
время.
act, and we have to try
Они
to
в
do
сфере
something to
политического
benefit
процесса,
people
демократии,
soon.
открытости, того, что человек
We have
может
already
рассказать.
benefited our people in the
Кислородом
political
дышать
process,
воздух, они уже
in
есть.
giving them
Но нам
freedom,
нужно,
in
чтобы
giving
рядом
them
с этим
a chance to breathe,
были-
so to say,
был прогресс и в
politically,
сфере
but
экономики,
we
который
also
вернулся,
have to make sure
и
that soon
благо
there
для
is
людей,
progress
улучшение
in the
жизненных
economy, there are
условий.
benefits in the
Для
economy,
этого
in
есть
people's
возможности
lives.
уже
We
в
can do it.
ближайшее
I
время
think that very
тоже
soon we can achieve
достичь
such results.
первых результатов и
First, initial results in
выйти на
improving
дорогу,
people's lives
набрать
and
другую
in
динамику для того, чтобы решать
making our
эти,
society more
скажем
dynamic
так,
to
насущные
address
проблемы жизни
these
наших людей.
very practical
Поэтому
problems. So
урожай
I think that
далекий
the
может
harvest,
быть более
of
богатым,
course,
но и
will be
сейчас
very
мы
rich
рассчитываем
in the
на то,
future,
чтобы
but even in the near
все то,
future
что мы
we
делаем,
expect
приносило людям
our efforts to yield
то, на что они
practical
рассчитывают.
results for the people.
Mikhail Sergeyevich, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you very much indeed.
Спасибо, Михаил Сергеевич. Спасибо
Thank you.
большое.
Thank you very much.
Мы понимаем, как вам нелегко
could I
было
just, I
вырвать
would just
время.
like to
Это сейчас делаем.
give this to you, and I wonder. And if you read the inscription, could I get you to sign this, Mr. President? Mr. President, we have been watching this television
Вы
series.
хотите,
by
чтобы я вам
Jon
лично
Snow.
или
In
расписал?
Russian.
Do you want it in Russian? And you
In
personally?
Russian, of course, but it would be lovely, yeah.
Jon Snow. To Jon Snow in memory, and with the meeting and with the whole for cooperation, for the sake of getting closer together.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We have been watching this wonderful program that Vitaly Ignatchenko has made, the Second Russian Revolution. Real history.
Вы занимались этим?
I didn't make it, I've been watching it though. And Mr. Ignatchenko has done a marvelous job telling the history of.
Спасибо вам большое. Спасибо и счастливого вам пути. Мы еще поговорим о результатах.